excited to be here to talk about a subject that I didn't see this coming back when I started my career at Microsoft way back when. The concept of software asset management, it wasn't, it hadn't been birthed. And so just having almost been in the right place at the right time, I'm really happy to be here, still involved in software asset management. But before getting into some of the specifics, just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I live out in Portland, Oregon, the USA, with my wife and two dogs. And you only see the one dog there on the far right that is taken over the captain's chair of our car. I've loved my mom and dad. They're my idols. They're the people that I look up to. And all told, I'm a big golfer, love family. I'm happy to be here with everybody. So I wanted to walk through software asset management. It's almost view this as a from to conversation, in so much as the way software asset management was back in 15, 20 years ago, it was heavily ingrained in understanding the technologies that you have locally installed on your computer, and understanding how many processors or cores or just how many units were locally installed on company owned or leased devices. And over the years, there has been some constant change and an ebb and a flow in how software is licensed, so how we count it, how we manage it, and it always keeps you on your toes. I say that because SaaS is substantially different now that we have the cloud, and the cloud is here to stay, and we'll walk through some of the specifics there. But SaaS has completely changed the way software asset managers think about their roles and really the future of their career. As software asset management and locally installed perpetual licenses, as that continues to dissipate and the cloud begins to take over, it's going to force us, all of us in the IT asset management or software asset management realm, to shift with it. So throughout this presentation, again, I really encourage everybody, please utilize the chat window. I know that there's terminology that even I am still trying to grasp and fully understand. So I really want to make this useful for you, and also give you an outlet going forward to reach out to me for any questions, comments, feedback, etc. So please use the chat feature. And once we walk through the content here, we'll have two-way dialogue in terms of a Q&A. So specifically, what we'll do is we'll walk through some of the business cases for needing to manage software as a service. And I say that because conventional wisdom, and I've heard this a number of times, is if it doesn't involve audit or compliance, well, what is there to manage, right? The concept of compliance and external publisher audits, that has really, those are two words, compliance and audit, that have followed this industry from day one. And now that the key business drivers for managing SaaS are not rooted in compliance and audit, it's shifting the way that we think. And there's a number of issues associated with managing SaaS that you will see that it can become very challenging. But with that, and this is the overarching theme of the next 30 to 45 minutes we'll be together, is the opportunity for software asset managers. It's never been brighter. It's different, but I think in terms of opportunity for us, this is a good spot to be in. So I'm really happy that we have so many folks here that we'll spend 30, 45 minutes together. Starting with SaaS and the concept of on-premises software, as I'd mentioned, really starting to fade away. And one example of that, and there are many, is IBM. I believe it's within the next 2 years or before 2024. I don't know the exact number. Is they will discontinue all perpetual licenses that they offer. And the specifics, they're still ironing out. But the point here is that IBM is a publisher, one of the flagship publishers in the software asset management realm, along with your SAPs, Microsoft, Oracle, et cetera. They're all effectively going about business the same way. And what is meant by that is their technologies are only going to be delivered via the cloud. So by 2026, the majority of the publishers, and I've already referenced a few of them, will completely discontinue organizations' ability to purchase perpetual licenses. Above and beyond that, the spend, and we'll talk about some specifics in terms of just the overall spend in SaaS and the cloud. The numbers are they're eye-popping as far as how much this is costing organizations each and every year, and in many cases over the course of the next 5 years. So I wanted to give you an idea of, when we talk about the scope of what software asset managers are required to manage, it's the sheer number of applications. Now I want each of you to take a look at the organizations that you work for, or maybe you represent them in terms of if you work for a consulting firm, is just to give you an idea and to quantify the opportunity. So when I got to Nike, I was the director of software asset management at Nike. This is when I was introduced to SaaS. And I, like many, I didn't think that there really was much to manage, right? If people have access to their technology and they can effectively just sign into a website, what is there for me to manage? There wasn't putting agents on machines and understanding, how many, the quantity of the applications that were installed on end user machines or even in the data center. It's what is there to manage. I do want to highlight the sheer number of applications and the explosion of SaaS applications throughout. Now, there has been some pain along the way where really it's almost too much of a good thing is how I would characterize SaaS, in so much as that technology is very easy to get to. So this is a segue to many years ago when I started my career at Microsoft. This is the way technology was delivered. There's a CD and there's a CD key. And so there were layers associated with installing software. I don't want to call them barriers of entry, but there was a process. Now, just a fun activity is I want each of you to, and you can type it in the chat window or write it down, or want each of you to write down an application, the name of any application that you utilize, perhaps on a daily basis. Just be thinking of an application or two that you utilize, and if you can take 5 to 10 seconds to put that in the chat window, and it's okay, it's purely optional. I'd appreciate that. To get access to technology, and subsequently how easy it is to overconsume products just in that amount of time. So if we go back to the CD and the CD key, you can imagine to have to install bits and bytes on your machine, and you have to have the product key, and there's a cadence there. But the way technology is delivered today, that is how easy it is to abuse it. And it's as simple as signing into a website. And so just be thinking of that in terms of governance and how do we react to it. When we access applications that are in the cloud, effectively that's our organization's data there. So we just want to be cognizant of all the applications that any of our employees are using at our organization, and to what extent. So it happens very quickly. On average, organizations will have anywhere from, it's right around 300 to 400 SaaS applications in their environment. And to take a step back to Nike, when I eventually got the grasp of how to even identify SaaS applications, which we'll get into, I assumed that maybe they had 200 200, 250. The number ended up being 1,800. And it was admittedly, it was a bit daunting. About 50,000, 55,000 information workers. But it was really an epiphany for me selfishly in my career is, what am I going to do with all this? So once I'm able to see how many SaaS applications we have, it almost creates a then what? Now what are we going to do? And so it was, there are some remediation efforts and there's some best practices, but really just want to illustrate the size and the scope and the magnitude of how many applications are out there today. And to cite specifics, when I started at Nike in 2018, there were roughly 7,000 to 8,000 SaaS apps. And today there's over 21,000 commercially licensable SaaS applications available. So I don't know when it's going to end or if it's going to end. Who knows? Just know that they are there. SaaS is here to stay. And it's really today, traditionally, it's where the work happens. Now, when we talk about on-premises software asset management, typically what we talk about is understanding what is installed where and what is the operating environment where the product is installed. So things like processors, cores, virtual cores, et cetera. With SaaS, it's a follow the money approach. So I wanted to give you some context as to organizations' operating expenses. That SaaS is now the second largest expense behind employees. Again, that's also a statistic that really caught me off guard as to how expensive these applications are, how many of them are, and how easy they are to gain access to. Now the future. So here's a little bit of an idea as to the magnitude and how we can help organizations all over the planet start to get a grasp on how much they are spending on SaaS. And in many cases, they're not aware of it. That's something that I learned very quickly, whereby, and I'll cite an example of when an organization, employees have corporate credit cards, for expenses, be it travel expense or marketing budgets or whatever it might be. And what we're noticing is there is a slew of money being spent on software, on SaaS applications via corporate credit card. The challenge with it is when individuals expense software, they're not calling it software. They're calling it, and this is the truth. At Nike, there was in excess of $150,000 that was spent on SaaS applications coded as meals and entertainment. So how we're able to see and ultimately vet what is SaaS and what is technology, in many cases, the person that's expensing and paying for that application, they don't view it as software. They just view it as a part of their just standard operating budget. And for those when we talk about SaaS, that's software as a service. So you can liken that to a lot of the end user applications, the Adobes and the Microsofts and Asanas and Airtables. The IaaS is your infrastructure centric items, and PaaS is your platform spend. Typically ends up in the Ollie Cloud, Azure, or AWS, just for context. And that's what I mean by terminology. It's evolved, and really there isn't a universal language out there in terms of what to call all of this. You can safely and confidently, unequivocally assume that when we talk about SaaS or IaaS or PaaS, this is cloud spend. This is global cloud spend. And as you'll see, by 2026, it will have almost tripled what it was 6 years ago. So it's not getting any more cost effective, and it's becoming much easier to get. And that happens through what is called a technical lock-in, where it's very easy to get in and to access these SaaS applications. And once you're in, typically you don't leave. And that's exactly what the software publishers want. Now the fun part. It becomes very complicated to manage this. It becomes very complex just to get an understanding of what is out there in your organization's environment. What makes this complex is that there are applications that certain business units, they require to be successful. And what we're seeing is there are certain business units that will have in excess of 100 different applications that they use just for their specific area of focus. And when you start to add up varying business units at a lot of some of these larger global entities, the number of applications skyrockets. And truth be told, these employees that have access to all of these applications, they're really just trying to solve business problems. So there's nothing truly to fix, if that makes sense. So having a lot of applications, you want to know you can't manage what you cannot see. But in some cases, it might make sense for them to have a slew of applications. We'll talk about how to approach when you have a large number of applications that typically would perform similar functions. Are there any? I don't know if I could see the chat window. Did we have any? Do we have any questions, comments, thoughts before we hop into where the opportunity is?
So far, I do not see any comments or questions yet.
Okay, no problem. No problem. From on-premises to the cloud, where is the opportunity? What does the entire ecosystem of SaaS management, what does it look like? Let's start by what it looks like, let's say 10, 15 years ago, the way SaaS, or the way software license management was with our traditional software applications, your Windows servers, your SQL servers, and what I'm calling traditional SAM. That's what a lot of us are used to. And within that, managing the life cycle of these applications, from onboarding them into the organization to making them readily available to install. And this is an angle towards life cycle management and cost management. This is the way SAM, if you will, dating all the way back to, I'd say, the early 2000s. This is our responsibilities for a software asset manager. They're relatively known, right? We've had in excess of almost 2 decades of a playbook for how to manage some of these subtle idiosyncrasies associated with things like active passive environments.
Hi, sorry, Lance. There is a question on the chat right now.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read it out?
Yes, okay, please.
So, yeah. So this is by Pradeep. He asked, what is the best approach to handle SaaS apps?
Yes, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. This is good. Perfect segue. You set me up in a good way. So we go from on-premises SAM, and now we've included SaaS. And really what I want to highlight is just the growing number of responsibilities that are associated with SaaS applications. So no longer is it discover, understand how many entitlements you have relative to how many deployments you have, and that will give us a delta, right? Are we in compliance or are we not? There are so many disparate groups that are now managing their own applications, and IT is no longer the sole proprietor, if you will, of software applications inside organizations. The point of this is because of the way SaaS is purchased, the way it's delivered, and the way it's utilized, it's caused and forced us in the software license management realm to have to adapt to the way and things that we manage and the items that we need to pay attention to, it can become overwhelming. It can become overwhelming. We'll simplify it, and that's perfect tie into Pradeep's question, which we'll get into. But I really want you to digest this view, because gone are the days of IT owning, information technology owning all of these applications, and them either whitelisting them or somehow blocking access to applications. Now, business units own, I want to say it's 66% of all applications, all SaaS applications, 66% of them are managed outside of IT. There's a good side to this as well, because this does create opportunity. But I did want you to take a look at some of the opportunities that we have here in terms of what is SaaS management nowadays. And there's a slew of opportunity, and with that, the rewards come with it, right? So the days of performing a license reconciliation and achieving some semblance of cost savings and celebrating that just within IT, that's typically the way it was. With SaaS, now you're able to bring disparate business groups together. So you become far more visible. And there's it's a golden opportunity to jump into SaaS management. And some of the base fundamentals, they haven't changed, right? Use what you pay for and pay for what you use. That hasn't changed. Just how software is delivered and how people access it, that has. So I don't want to make it too complex, but I do want to illustrate that it's changing, and there's some shifts in the marketplace with how do we manage it. So quickly, I want to go through just the cadence of on-premises SAM and some of the key foundational steps associated with on-premises SAM, starting with our step one in any successful on-premises SAM function. It's what is deployed, right? And we've talked about it a little bit already. And things like the server environment, the operating system make, model, and version, how the product was installed. So step one of on-premises SAM, or discovery process, is always grounded in the technical deployment metadata. And that's typically in an effort, so now the output is we'll create an effective license position from those deployment details. And I'm not sure if some of those in the audience are familiar with that view there. That is a screenshot of a Microsoft, I think they're called I don't know what they call them nowadays. I think they're SAM reconciliations, a self-audit, many different terms. But long story short, Microsoft has been in the SAM, the software asset management game, for an awful long time. And I cannot tell you how many of these I filled out in my day. So again, this is the on-premises SAM. Once we've captured deployment details, we've amalgamated it, we understand what's being utilized, we have our compliance or our effective license position. Now it's what did we do with it? And I called it singular, it being the remediation plan. So we have a compliance report. What do we typically do with it? And oftentimes it was very simple. It's if we've installed 10 items and we own 5, well, then we true up 5 items. So this is really just meant to say that to remedy a effective license position, it's relatively straightforward. We either true up and get right with our licenses so that we're not out of compliance, or we make some maneuver to perhaps change how a product is installed, or maybe even uninstall it in some cases. Now the shift, decision-making, as we've touched on already. We have our deployment details, we have the complete and total picture, we have our compliance position, we have made a decision to either true up or maybe uninstall. The decisions to do that are typically grounded in IT and IT only. And so those tended to be, past tense, those tended to be our stakeholders in this entire on-premises software asset management lifecycle. How does that differ from SaaS? Drastically. And look no further than step one. So when we talk about discovery on the on-premises side, it's deployment details, which we've touched upon. For SaaS, our starting point, step one, phase one, is unabated access to spend details. Now, this is a big shift. This is a big shift from what a lot of us in the software asset management industry are used to. Like I said, we're used to understanding what is out there in the environment. Well, there's nothing installed typically. There might be some exceptions, but SaaS is effectively a website. So how do we know what we're using? How would we even start? And it starts with raw spend details. Huge shift, a huge shift, as I'm guessing that you can start to imagine now the cadence and the workflow of managing SaaS is a little bit different. Now the opportunity. So we're on premises, we had our effective license position or compliance position. With SaaS, there are many deliverables. Now we know, and we talked about this early in the onset of this conversation, is that compliance and audit are not business drivers, key business drivers for SaaS. Reality is the key business drivers for SaaS, there's many. There's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more groups that we can impact. And so a redundancy report, what does that mean? A redundancy report really is how many applications do we have that effectively perform the same function or similar functions? That is an example of the new age, the new world deliverables. Since it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to have 40 separate project management applications. That's a true story. It doesn't make sense for us to have 40 separate project management applications. Now our responsibility as software asset managers is to make sure that we get to 39 project management applications before we get to 41. And so it's a little different. It's a little different. Some of the deliverables are different, but your value to the company is exponentially greater, as there is no remediation plan, a single simple remediation plan for all of these deliverables in SaaS. It really is all over the board. And that, as I'd mentioned, that's the beauty. That's really the beauty of SaaS management. It truly is the opportunity. Culturally, it has been a dramatic shift in who buys software at organizations now. Like we've touched upon, typically all software flows through IT. IT needs to know about it, right? That's really their job, is to make sure that items are patched. We're at the correct service level, and at the end of the day, IT owns and is responsible for software applications. Now the decision making is everybody. Everybody in your organization is or will be effectively software asset managers. So there's the spread, the opportunity to work internally to do what's best for your employer. Decisions are being made by individual business units. And that means our partners, who we partner with, who our keys to success as software asset managers, our keys to success are now grounded in every business unit in your company. No longer is it simply just IT. That too was a pretty dramatic shift that I guess you could say I learned the hard way, but really something to pay attention to.
Hi, Lance. Sorry, we have one more question on the chat box. So yeah, this is by Akshay. He asks, a SaaS vendor like KuPower, how it looks, its usage is not clear, and we have to entirely depend on the entitlement data provided by the vendor or stakeholder. In that case, what is the industry recommended practices for optimization?
Yeah, so it really is the follow the money approach. So this is where the separation in SaaS management tools comes into play. So the spend, now when you look at line item details, and we can even, my own checking account, I actually did this as an activity, and I encourage you to do this as well, is to understand there are items there that admittedly, and I'm speaking just for myself, that I don't know what that is. Like I didn't know what that $20 spend was. It's just a alphanumeric description and then a cost and a date. Now, because I have a decent idea of what I spent money on, I was able to reasonably extrapolate what that was. But in every situation, and this is good to walk through, in every situation, if corporate dollars were spent, your SaaS management platform should be able to normalize what that is, or at least begin down the path of understanding what that was. Now, I want to be fair to this question, that it's not a straight line where if we're looking at all the details of what was purchased, that it's just going to describe it for us, right? There's the order of the words in the description, how many characters are in the description, the price. There are many variables in the spend details. There's one exception, which we'll talk about. There are many variables in those raw spend details that will help lead us down the path of unearthing these applications. There might be more than one exception, but I do know that the biggest exception is when we're purchasing applications from a reseller, a value-added reseller, whereby it will just say CDW, and this is just an example, CDW, and then an amount. Well, in that case, we're going to have to dig a little bit deeper. So there's a lot of steps associated with understanding what SaaS applications we have out there. But just in terms of best practices, the raw spend details, your SaaS management platform, it must be able to normalize and begin to unearth what that might be. There's really, and it's a fair question, right? It's if spend details is the linchpin to being able to manage SaaS, then you must have a platform that is capable enough to be able to unearth what that is. And that's really no different than if we're looking for locally installed files on machines and understand, based on those executables or DLLs or running processes, to decipher whether or not that item is standard edition or enterprise edition. It's really no different with SaaS. It's just the normalization techniques come from SaaS platforms, which are growing, which are evolving, and that's, I guess you could say, that's the new world. I hope that addresses the question, but we have raw spend details. That can lead us down the path. It's not always going to be a direct, this is exactly what it is and who purchased it, but that's where we can begin to learn. And reseller reports can also help us vet that, but it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I firmly believe that that's where the opportunity is, but yeah, it does. It's as I've mentioned before, it's complex. It's complex, but we want to spend our time in unearthing all the SaaS applications in our environment, not necessarily. And this is a perfect segue, where I've seen a lot of asset management functions struggle when they want to race, they want to sprint. And the crawl, walk, run, although that individual down there looks ill, does not look like he or she may be crawling. It was meant for that individual to be crawling. Raw spend details. That's our linchpin. That's step one. And visibility is our goal. And I've told a lot of prospective clients that they want to know how to remediate problems with SaaS. And I have to respectfully say to them that step one of effective SaaS management is visibility. Step two is that it doesn't matter. Step three, it doesn't matter. Step four is it doesn't matter. We've got to gain that visibility and start to focus our time and energy there. And I reference, to harken back to a lot of asset management functions, they tend to struggle when they just grab the low-hanging fruit and try to chase quick wins. There's nothing wrong with that, but just know that that's a short-term, that's a project, chasing short-term wins. SaaS management it needs to be programmatic in order to deliver value back to your employer or organizations that you may consult with and for. It's a good question. And it's a good question because it's kind of the only question that really matters is what do we do? Where do we start? So the approach, this is really just an angle and almost a repeat of what we went through already in terms of how do we start and how do we start to stack data on top of each other so that we can get to that sprint, that optimization, that taking action phase. How do we get there? As we've discussed, the raw spend details, and hopefully this segues into the most recent question, is once we have exhausted understanding the raw spend details, then we ultimately normalize it into what is in scope, so what is software and what might not be. Then we fold in contract details. And I think this is where we were headed here, is if we cannot find the information within the raw spend, I firmly believe that we go back to the spend and we do find it. We have to. There's no asset that's owned with SaaS. So the cadence and the flow is not that we bought a license and we have it forever. It's oftentimes it's monthly, it's monthly renewals, maybe annual renewals, is constant visibility into spend. And we always get better at working with this data as time passes, and it'll begin to crystallize. It really, the first time through, it can be a bit daunting. But the point is we start to fold in and stack on top of those raw spend details, some items in contracts. Something to pay close attention to, and this is more of just a tactical approach to consider, is I've seen a number of SaaS contracts that they don't have a quantity. It will have the name of it will have the description of the product, and within the description, there will be a quantity 500 or something. But in the actual quantity field of the purchase order, it will say quantity 1. I would encourage you to hold your SaaS, the software publishers that you work with accountable, where they don't try to muddle in the quantity within the description. That there's a product name, there's a quantity, and then there's a price. That's definitely something that you would want to consider, because I'm not suggesting they're trying to get around anything, but I do know that it's important for us to be able to manage what they're selling us. And I've seen a lot of contracts be written that feel loose. They don't feel like it's a very rigid. I mean, it's a product, make, model, and version, quantity, and a price. So I just encourage you, if you have access to some of those contracts, to just take a look at them and understand them a little bit better, and see if that is happening with some of the publishers that you might be working with. If we go back to step 1, again, I just wanted to liken this to on-premises SAM, where step 1 for on-premises SAM would be understanding what's installed in the environment, just to give you a parallel. This is really focused on, how do you manage SaaS? What are the steps? And now we start to understand when we get to consumption, and this is what a lot of us are familiar with, is we know how many we have installed of a Windows or SQL or an Oracle database. For SaaS, how do we get that? And that's typically achieved through either directly integrating to the software publisher's portal, or the most common way to understand what's consumed is a direct connection to your single sign-on platform. So consumption is a little bit, I think that the word should probably be utilization versus consumption. I know that's splitting hairs, but really we just want to understand how many warm-blooded humans are utilizing that application. This is our effective license position with SaaS. It's really just a reconciliation of what we've purchased and understanding some active usage details. no different than on premises. We want to understand the totality of what are we looking at with these 1,800 SaaS applications, and we have usage details for some of them. Typically, your deliverables will be grounded. It'll be grounded in these items here, in really establishing a renewal calendar, being able to get ahead of it. Since you have so much more to manage nowadays, a renewal calendar, and it sounds trivial and it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised at how many organizations just let their software auto renew, and software publishers love that. They're grateful for that. I mean, part of me thinks that they set up this concept associated with the cloud so that people do just auto renew. So a renewal calendar, I had no idea how big of an impact having a detailed renewal calendar would be, but that is certainly surfaced as a key deliverable as time has passed. I'll pause there. I've been talking quite a bit. Yeah, I do want to give you the opportunity to maybe pose some scenarios or questions, or maybe something that you're challenged with in the software license management realm. I did want to speak to you about the differences and how the world is shifting from on-premises SAM to SaaS, but I really wanted to open up the floor. Yeah, please use the chat window. The organic discussion is important.
Yeah, so I have 3 questions already on the chat box here. So this first one is by Kriti. In case of integration of different SaaS software to one platform, what are the key factors one should look into, and what are the key challenges?
Access. So we'll start with the challenges. It's a great question. What are data is everything, right? Data is everything. I wouldn't say our jobs are easy when we have all the data, but I can honestly say that getting access to this content tends to be the challenge. So the biggest challenge, it's no different SaaS to on-premises, is gaining access to these portals. And it really depends on the application in and of itself. But if you dial in the raw spend details, you're going to then know what you need access to, right? So once we've normalized raw spend details, now we know all the applications that our organization has spent money on, which then, and oftentimes you'll have a name associated with it as well, especially if the individual used a corporate credit card to bring into the environment, commonly known as shadow IT. Is normalized spend then gives us the path for who do we need to talk to gain access to these portals. And if, say in the event we do not gain access to the portal, so we know that there's significant AWS spend, when we have normalized spend details constantly, this is where a SAM program is vital to be able to have constant access to spend details. All we can do, if we don't have access to the workloads and consumption, let's just assume that we do not, and that's a key challenge, right? How do I manage it if I don't know how much we're using? What I've done is there will be an ebb and a flow on just the spend details. So I think what I'm trying to say is we can only work with the data that we have access to. So if we focus our time and energy on ensuring access to the spend details, and there's averages out there. That's why I had a previous slide that showed organizations from one to 1,000 employees typically have this many applications and spend this much annually on SaaS. So we kind of have an idea as to what we're looking for. So if we get access to spend details and the totals look very low, odds are high they probably are. So to answer the question, we understand to the best of our ability the ebb and flow of monthly spend for these platforms. It becomes very tricky when you get to the AWSs and to a lesser extent Azure, of gaining access to all of the logins that people have. But let's focus on what we can get, right? And then work gives us the opportunity to work with those individuals who will have administrative access to these portals to start to unearth consumption details. But follow the money, focus focus on spend, and trends will start to surface. They will. They'll start to surface. You'll start to see spikes or certain months or quarters of a fiscal year that are abnormal, and that's your chance to be a superhero internally, is just to identify and socialize some of that information. I hope that helps. It is tricky though. There's no doubt. We know activity is happening. We just can't oftentimes get direct access to it, but that's okay. Through spend details, we can get there.
All right. Shall I move on to the next question? Okay,
Please.
so this is by Gautam. He asks, most of the small and mid-sized organization concerned about the privacy and breach. So this is the question.
Privacy. I'm sorry. Privacy of, or maybe referring to the spend details and not wanting to unearth that information. I mean, we can just assume that because that's exactly what happened to me at Nike. And honestly, all we can do is just show them the opportunity. There's a slew of statistics out there that I can supply you with that shows how much true cost savings is out there. And really, I think that as people start to understand the totality of the opportunity of SaaS management and truly how much waste there is, and in the SaaS management index that my employer Giles, they released about 8 months ago, 40% of provisioned SaaS licenses go unutilized. So all we can do is socialize the facts and the cost savings opportunities. And oftentimes that's really all it takes to get the ball rolling. It's challenging, right? It's challenging. Give me unabated access to all the spend details that your organization has made. That's a pretty aggressive ask. I definitely, I understand that, but I do think articulating the opportunity to them, that's at this point, that's all we can do. And I think that that's really what's happening in the marketplace today, is that I think there's a lot of organizations that haven't yet felt the pain. Now, the bills, and we went through this earlier, where the costs over a 6-year period will triple. Organizations spend for cloud software is slated to triple in 6 years. At some point, I'm confident that this will become topical. It's hard to say when, but the opportunity is there. Secondarily, when we talk about security and privacy, something's important. An important anecdote to hone in on is it's understanding where your company's data is. Now, any chief technology officer or IT director, if a CEO asks them, where is our data? How many applications do we have our company data in? And that chief technology officer or IT director doesn't know, that's where problems start to arise. So when in terms of security, really, it's visibility to where company data is. That's a key driver here in terms of opportunity with SaaS management. Every, I think they're CISO, I believe your security directors and security-centric personnel, their job is to know where the company data is at all times. And I think the approach to SaaS management, that's going to be really the only way that he or she is going to get there.
All right, we have one more question on the chat box. This is by Vivekanandan. Are there any concrete solution provided for SaaS-enabled clients in culling out the delta data and showcasing value? Any use case, please?
Yeah. The use case and value of the SaaS management platform. You have to help me unpack that a little bit.
Okay, maybe Vivekanandan, if you are listening, you can raise your hand and you can directly speak with the speaker as well if you'd like. or you can just type it on the chat box as well.
Yeah.
So
And I
as we
think
wait for him, yeah.
We're nearing the end, so that's the Q&A session. This might be a good opportunity to perhaps shift in that direction. But
okay.
Where is the opportunity? We've went through this pretty in a relatively extensive manner, in so much as that there's no prescriptive steps for SaaS management. That's where the opportunity is. And I'm hopeful 6 months or a year from now that I'll be an audience member and you come back to us and tell us what you learned and how you did. So understand that it's greenfield, and the opportunity is it's endless. It really is. I will say that your internal relationships, that's probably the biggest shift across the board, is having relationships with those in finance, in procurement, in security. Those were relationships that we really didn't rely on for on-premises SAM, but I can guarantee you those relationships, they're there now, and they need us and we need them. So it's important that we underscore the opportunity there. Yeah, if there are any questions, comments, feedback, this is really the fun part, is to start to unpack this. And I understand how daunting it can seem to manage SaaS. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of applications. There's different partnerships. There is a lot going on. But at the end of the day, the perpetual world it's ceasing to exist. So good opportunity for us to pivot.
Okay, so I have a raised hand here by Pradeep. He wants to ask his question directly. Can we move to him?
Yeah. Please.
Okay. All right, Pradeep, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So thanks for briefing a good session. So I just have one query related to the SaaS management, right? So when you talk about the SaaS management, have you come across any specialized tools other than our typical SAM tools like Flexera or Snow License Manager or SAM Pro? Other than we know that pretty it majorly it covers all the major publishers. But other than that, when it comes to SaaS, there are a lot many vendors which we really do not know in the market, right?
Yes.
So have you come across any specialized tools that can really help in managing the SaaS?
Yes, I do know of one unequivocally, and it's the one that I used at Nike for the better part of 3.5 years. Xylo is that solution. That's really how I was introduced to them, and they taught me really what SaaS management was. So yeah, there's a few out there, and I can certainly supply some of those vendors to you. But I do think it's important. I'm so glad you asked this, because what's happening in the marketplace today is that organizations are defaulting to the SAM Pros, to the Snow software, and to the Flexeras. And I'm not here to talk about those specific vendors in and of themselves. But what we can state as fact is that those technologies were crafted and grounded as on-premises software asset management solutions. So could they add the capability to manage SaaS? Time will tell, but there are a number of specifically designed SaaS management platforms like Xylo, that the days of best of breed software, they're here now. And what is meant by that is, in my confident and experienced opinion, is that we're going to need the efforts of all of those tools. We're going to need the Flexeras in conjunction with Xylo in order to run an effective SAM function.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because one of the major the challenge that I have faced so far is that the tools have a dependency on SSO and it has a background tool need to be integrated. But not majority of the SaaS vendors goes with, an option of SSO sign-in options. So where we are just, left alone and nobody would have clue at what is happening around those. So
yeah. I'd love to talk offline about that. Just show you some of the subtleties there within. That's where I think the foundational item with SaaS management. And if there's any one thing that I'm hopeful that you guys are able to take away from this, is that spend details. That's that has to be our starting point. And I say that because we can try to connect to SSO, but SSO is only going to tell us what we already know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's, it's a lot of opportunity, right? There really is. And I do think that any, any leader, any C-level executive is they want to know where they can save money and where they can possibly save money to reallocate to other projects. And I guarantee that there's opportunity there for all organizations. And I'll always challenge organizations that we work with. Respectful, playful challenge of write down how many SaaS applications that you think that you have in your organization. And I'd bet that it's at least triple that. And that's I learned it the hard way.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I know. I'm trying to come back and to understand that, how we can really get, if you really get into from a revenue standpoint, I totally understand, from moving to FinOps and understanding the cloud part of it. But if you really get into that level, so again, there will be a lot of challenges in getting that, information, as somebody has already highlighted, like, the revenue information of an organization that has a lot of security and piracy and a lot of things are there. And before we get that information, and if it has not been tracked, let's say if a mid-level enterprise organization is there where they don't have a clue, they really don't know to whom they have purchasing and what has been purchased, but they know that they have the revenues going on.
Right.
I have come across a few specific applications where organization does not know who is actually working on what. So
yes. Yeah. And this is a great conversation that there oftentimes, we can react to the problems, if you will, or like we know that there's issues happening inside whatever organizations that we're speaking of. Yeah. But what I did is I went to why is this happening? Why are there so many applications here? And had to self-reflect to say, is it easy for people in my organization to request software? In other words, if they don't know where to go and there's not a single place to go request software that we may already have an enterprise agreement for or a volume agreement for, or request a net new application, we've got to make it easier for them. So I almost lean to the start of the workflow as much as anything, so that we can govern and onboard any net new applications into our employer or the organizations that we work for. I almost look left where a lot of people may potentially look right.
Yeah. So the process is going to be one of the key area which we really want to strengthen. That. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Fun conversation. I appreciate you asking that and being here today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so shall we move on to Vivekananda's question because he has his raised hand here?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Please go ahead, Vivek.
Yeah. Hey, hi. That was a good presentation as well. Then I just had a question of, can you give us any case study in terms of having a solid implementation on what kind of value as compared to on premises implemented the softwares, right? So because mostly on the software entitlements or utilization is what is the key area that would be targeted across. But when it comes to SaaS applications, it goes as like you pay for what you use, right? So there is no point of having any overutilization in that case, right? So can you give the values and any case studies in specific to any clients that has been implemented?
Yeah, I would challenge that a little bit. That you pay for what you use. Now for the platforms, yes, the platforms that definitely. I mean, if you're spinning up instances in AWS and Azure, it's a consumption-based product. Now, you do want to understand trends. It's not because an instance has been spun up, that does not mean it's utilized. That does not, unequivocally, no doubt about it. When we get to a lot of technologies that are licensed by user, I've seen organizations buy 1,000 units. So Miro is an example. I had no idea what Miro was. Then the pandemic hit, and Miro became the hottest product on the planet. Again, I didn't know what it was. It's a whiteboarding solution. So we bought thousands of Miro licenses, not thinking ahead. Just, we need it now, 3-year agreement, go. Oh, we ended up utilizing maybe in the 40 to 50% range total. So we've got to be mindful of that what is our active utilization? Best practice for me, since it's almost impossible to buy 1,000 user licenses and always be using 990 or just some, to be using 99% of it. But set the bar at about 85% active utilization threshold. And when we're connected to SSO, we're seeing the login activities. We're seeing active access. I guess I don't want to say usage. But 85% utilization, that's just a best practice threshold. But unequivocally, the value is organizations are buying way more than they ever use. And as I'd mentioned before, the software publishers love that. They love it. Buy 1,000 and use 300. That's exactly what they want. And they want you to think you're getting a good deal. So in terms of value, let's look at the facts. Irrefutable, quantifiable fact. It's tough to argue. Now, there's levels to this, right? So the timing of it, I would argue, is probably the biggest challenge. Meaning, we can see that we're using 20% of a random application. 20% of the users are utilizing it, but we can't take action until we have an anniversary date or a renewal date. So it's constant visibility into utilization leading up to these contract renewals. That's why renewal calendar is huge in terms of deliverables that we can bring to the table to add value. And it's really not to say we should get something or we shouldn't. It's really just to say, let's ground these decisions in fact, not, well, we think we're going to use whatever number it might be. We don't think we're going to use something. Let's let the data tell the story and use that to start with. So 40% of provisioned user licenses go unutilized. And that's over at our organization. We've normalized over $1 trillion in just raw spend details. Of that, I think 25 to 28 billion were SaaS applications. There is, in terms of the dollars and cents, there is a bevy of opportunity out there in terms of cost savings, or it's tricky, right? Are we avoiding bad decisions, or are we truly saving money? I would just say, let's use what we pay for and not continue to do these publishers favors.
All right. Shall we move on to another question, or do you want to continue the presentation?
Yeah, I was just wrapping up the presentation. The questions are far.
Okay.
That's
all right.
Please.
All right. So there's one more question from Akshay. He says, even being vigilant, there are sometimes you can't control the security breach. How can we mitigate this? Any bullet point on this?
Yes. So what for over the course of 18 consecutive months, Nike averaged 30 net new applications into the environment, net new SaaS applications. Because we had constant visibility into spend, we were able to surface that. So this actually stitches together two key components. One, our solution, when a new application surfaces, we know of it immediately. So we can begin to report that to our friends in security. So we're really partnering with them. And additionally, this is we would then know, so say we have access to all spend details. We know when this application arrived. Oftentimes it's because it's purchased on corporate credit card. We know who would bring it in. Now we're buddies effectively with the security group. Now we have just supported them just through constant visibility. I didn't articulate that exactly how I wanted to, but it's a slow drip. It's constant motion in the SaaS management world. It's not a if-then statement. So constant visibility to spend, we can attack the problem faster, right? So we'll have constant visibility than applications that are that ultimately surface. And really all we would want to do in terms of security is if we see an application that was brought into our organization, it just basically fell out of the sky, we want to make sure that our security folks have the ability to truly vet that and just to understand, some of the general nature of what this application is, what type of data will be in there, who will be utilizing it. We become the go-to person to socialize the truth. And all it would really be is net new applications monthly. It becomes a very simple report, but when you're able to produce it monthly, you can become a very, very popular and a very influential person inside your organization. And again, the only way to do that is by being able to normalize those spend details.